Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so grateful and excited for today's talk. Thank you to the Professional Development Group, as well as the Center for the Study of Race, Ethnicity, and Equity with Tila, who just joined. They are one of our funders for this event, Larry. So we are very, very excited. I am one of the associate directors of this center. My name is Diana Barra, and I am assistant professor at the Brown School at Washington University in San Luis. I will share some slides. They're just some general information about today's event. So for those of you, sorry, I'm having a little trouble. Okay, there you go. For those of you who joined us back, can you see the big presentation or the small one?
The big.
Okay, good.
Good.
So for those of you who joined us back on September 27, we had Dr. Larry Ward scheduled to give the closing lecture, which was also part of the Mindfulness and Anti-Racism series that we've been carrying out for 4 years at WashU. But as many of you know, unfortunately, because of the hurricane, Larry wasn't able to join the webinar and we had to reschedule for today. So a little bit about our group. We are a group at the university that is formed by students, faculty members, researchers, staff, and both graduate and undergraduate students. We try to bring attention to the power of mindfulness at the university. We do events. These are some pictures from this year, Mindfulness Week. We had Mingo Rinpoche giving the keynote lecture on September 25th. We also had research presentations, art. We had a lot of students and group members that are being funded by our group to do mindfulness projects, present some of their work. This is our group, so you can scan this QR code and join. As I mentioned, we are a very transdisciplinary group, and not only at WashU, we also have members from other universities and even just nonprofits and smaller communities. So if you want to join, make sure you scan this QR code. We are funded by a grant from the Incubator for Transdisciplinary Futures at WashU, and they have been our main sustainer for the past 2 years, and we have 1 more year under their funding. So this was from last year when we had Dr. Richard Davidson and Amit Bernstein giving the 7th lecture, or he was the 6th speaker on the Mindfulness and Anti-Racism series. Some of the things that we do, we've done some retreats, mostly out in nature. Our last one was back in September at Kindred Forest, when we did a forest bathing practice, and that was extremely nourishing and beautiful. So these are our stars, wonderful line of speakers and visionaries and wisdom that we've had since 2021, starting with Rhonda McGee. And today, super honored to have Larry. Next April of next year, we're going to have our 9th speaker, Kara Lingo. The exact date has been confirmed. Sorry, I didn't update this, but I will put it at the end because we already have a date, although the registration link hasn't been set up yet. So I'm going to pass it to Atia now before I give an introduction about her. So going back here, Atia Tul Alim Thurman is a skilled facilitator of learning, community building, and social change. She has more than 22 years of experience collaborating on projects in the areas of health and human services, education, and community development. As a social work lecturer, equity and inclusion fellow, and dialogue across difference in structure, Atia facilitates growth experiences that integrate equity, mindfulness, justice, and healing. Drawing from diverse ancestry, life experiences, and spiritual practices, her lifelong aim is shared prosperity, collective peace, and love for all. So Atia will do us the honor of introducing Dr. Ward.
Thank you so much, my dear sister Diana. And thank you everyone for being here. Good afternoon and peaceful greetings. I am Atia Tul Alim, and I'm a member of the Mindfulness Science and Practice Group at WashU. It's an honor to be here in this beloved community. We appreciate that you're giving your attention and generative, imaginative energy for this transformative journey of collective healing and creating a future yet imagined. So first, I ask that you just bring your full attention into the moment, first by taking a deep breath. And as you breathe out, send loving kindness to our ancestors, our elders, and the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the indigenous people who were the original stewards of this great nation. Then I ask that you take another deep breath in and out. And on the out breath, send peace to our beloved community, our planet, our brethren far and wide, especially those who are experiencing conflict, violence, and vulnerability. And a final deep breath, I invite you to express appreciation for yourself and contemplate what compelled you to join us today. Here's what brought me here. Racism, as we know, is a plague upon the planet, fueled by systems of oppression, and we all pay the price for it. Some of us with our labor, some of us with our land, and others with our lives. Racial justice is an imperative for the healing of humanity and the survival of our planet and its species. And at WashU, we're integrating mindfulness into anti-racism, justice, inclusion, equity, and access. And our aim is twofold: to expand access to mindfulness and to catalyze social change with mindfulness interventions. So this is the fourth offering. This is the fourth year of offering the Mindfulness and Anti-Racism Speaker Series. And I want to give gratitude to Diana Parra for her vision and perseverance in sustaining this work, and especially for this series. Today's discussion represents a very special opportunity to welcome into this community Dr. Larry Ward, whose life journey and wisdom is helping us answer the question of how we free ourselves from repeated cycles of anger, denial, pain, fear, and violence. Dr. Larry Ward is a celebrated poet, author, spiritual teacher, and co-founder of the Lotus Institute. He was ordained as a Dharma teacher by Thich Nhat Hanh, the world-renowned peace activist. Dr. Ward brings 40 years of international experience in organizational change and community renewal to his work at the Lotus Institute and to us. He holds a PhD in religious studies with an emphasis on Buddhism and the neuroscience of meditation, and has trained at the Trauma Resource Institute. As a teacher, Larry interweaves insights with personal stories and resounding clarity that express his Dharma name, the Great Sound. He has committed his life to nonviolent social change, healing, and transformation at all levels. Today's talk is inspired by his book, America's Racial Karma, an invitation to heal, which offers much needed medicine for breaking America's cycle of racial trauma. Thank you, Dr. Larry Ward, for being in beloved community with us today.
It's my pleasure to be with you. It's taken a long time to get together. We tried to get out of our house to meet you the last September date, but our driveway was covered with trees. And so we were stuck. And so I want to apologize, not for the hurricane, because I didn't do it, but for the dysregulation it caused in your schedule and in our life. So in the description, I like to go back and read what people say when they describe what I'm going to talk about, just to check. And one of the things you mentioned, I think that's really important to understand, is our shared trauma with the race is like an iceberg. Only 10% of an iceberg is visible. The other 90% is where our problem lies. And so, in addition to everything we're doing, we must also facilitate a consciousness transformation. We must keep up the vigilance on social justice structures and systems, but we also must literally raise the consciousness beyond small definitions of ourselves. We have a dim view of ourselves as human beings, of one another, and of the earth. The same dim view that this is happenstance, that this doesn't really matter, or that it matters so much I want to burn it down. It can be either way or any way in between. But I want to begin with that iceberg image because I'm going to be talking about that 90% under the water. I've been in this work a long time. And a story from Chicago when I first really got involved with, I moved to Chicago to help rebuild the inner city after the riots, after Martin was killed. And a group of ministers had gotten together to do a white racism and Black American conference. I was invited to attend the conference, and there were about 50 people there. And when I opened the door to go in, I instantly knew it wasn't going to work. And I knew it's taken me all these years to figure out why. Took me 20 years to figure out why I had that intuition, which was correct, is because all of us are like that iceberg. 10% of our experience of racism, disrespect, injustice, whatever that means for you, is usually on top of your mind. But what's important to know is deep inside your body. It has planted itself in your nervous system and in your unconscious mind. And so for me, mindfulness is important in order to uncover what's been hidden. Because what we know about the unconscious, whether it's through Buddhist psychology or Freud or Jung, is that our unconscious mind runs our life. And so mindfulness is applying consciousness to our unconsciousness and transforming it toward justice, toward harmony, and toward peace. Most people don't even know when they have an unjust mind or an unharmonious mind. They don't know that. They cannot recognize themselves. Let me read a poem for you. This one, well, I think I have two of them here. Besides, these are new ones, kind of inspired by the election in the US. And pardon my speech, I'm dealing with some implant issues that I won't be able to fix until December. This one's called Some Monkey Stole the Mic. Some monkey stole the mic, praising the doctrine of discovery day and night, perfuming the land with smells of manifest destiny. Now, the furious egos rise in anger as it discovers it was not destined to become the God it wished to be, because it was never intended for anyone to be that God. Some monkey stole the mic. Second poem, day after the election. As my eyes opened this morning, I knew who won the election and why. If you wanted to build an all-white nation, you should not have brought me here.
Unknown caller.
To work the fields of cotton and tobacco, or to break my back laying railroad track, fix your meals, raise your children, tolerate and transcend your cruelty with my tears. Our shared trauma is profound. I now see its vastness of its field. So trouble the waters, there is difficulty transcending it, swimming in it, surviving in it. Know that you can. Know this deeply, because you have already survived. you're already here. And your ancestors are celebrating your presence. If you look and see with the eyes of truth, there were not hordes of non-whites coming for you on January 6th. Rather, it was your fellow white citizens. Truly, we're in apostrophe times. The four horsemen ride: famine, war, conquest, and death without reproach. Fueled by racism's psychic social rage, a white nation swan song made by fear and suffering. The illusion of otherness is tattered, but remains intact. I decided I wasn't going to do this as an academic presentation because it doesn't feel like that's what it is to me, though I could do that. This is going to be more, because for me, this is an issue of the heart. Sure, it's an issue of the mind. I include that too, but it is at the core. It is an issue of the heart, because the heart can see farther and feel farther than the mind. The European roots of our social psychology around race, which I mentioned in the book, is worth remembering because it still operates in our consciousness. It still influences how we think, how we speak, and how we walk and talk through the world, wherever in the world we are. So on page, as a reference, on page 51 of America's Racial Karma, there was a botanist, really, who had been spending time on categorizing plants and flowers and decided he would apply this same approach to categorizing human beings. That's the short story. And every night and I just reread this to see how relevant it is. He only had 4 ways of describing the human species. There were 4 kinds of human beings on the planet. There was Africans, Homo sapiens africanus, Black, polemic, relaxed, Black, frizzled hair, silky skin, flat nose, tumid lips, females without shame, mammary glands give milky abundantly, crafty, sly, lazy, cunning, lustful, careless, anoints himself with grease, and is governed by caprice. This was already in place long before any of us were born. Long before we were a twinkle in our parents' eye. His second category of human beings: red, ill-tempered, subjugated, hair black, straight, thick, nostrils wide, face harsh, beard scanty, obstinate, free, paints himself with red lines, and is ruled by custom. His third category of human beings: yellow, melancholy, stiff, black hair, dark eyes, severe, haughty, greedy, covered with loose clothing, and ruled by opinions. His fourth category: white, brownie, sanguine, abundant, long hair, blue eyes, gentle, acute, inventive, covered with close vestments, and governed by laws. Where have you heard that lately? where have you seen this lately? The point of the book is, once an idea is planted in our consciousness, like a seed planted in a garden, it will grow. If it's watered, if it gets nourishment, if you feed it, it will grow. It can be a weed. And you can look at what racism as a weed that people have fed and watered and cared for years, for centuries, driven by greed, hatred, and ignorance, which is the fuel of racism itself. All suffering is driven by the turning wheel of greed, hatred, and ignorance of the nature of reality and life. That we are all connected, whether we want to be or not. We are part of it all, with every tree, every fox, every hawk, every river, every mountain. These European roots, there's one thing to have that description written by somebody, but somebody took that description and put it in action. Put it in the papers, put it in the books, put it in the movies, put it in the stories, put it in the images that we've all been brainwashed with. It's like we've been living in Plato's cave, his allegory of the cave. And we have been shackled in one spot, looking at a screen telling us what everyone else is like. And so we assume that's the truth, having never been outside the cave to see the light. And many of us are still so trapped in the cave. And getting out of the cave is not easy. In Plato's story, there's a character who begins to climb out of the cave and he sees the light and he almost goes blind with awareness on how things really are. And then he gets inspiration to go back in the cave and help the other people who are in darkness out, and they almost kills him. Nobody really wants to come out of darkness because they've been comfortable in it, profitable in it, pleasurable in it, a sense of superiority in it. And so you take those 4 categories, for example, of human beings, and you then bring in the psychology of the self-esteem complex, and you get, I'm better than you, I'm worse than you, I'm the same as you. None of these things are true about any of us. The superiority complex took over these categories in their own way everywhere. And I've lived all over the world, and human beings go that way. we love status. We love thinking we're all that. We are self-cherishing, which is one of our wonderful qualities, but it also can be one of our unwonderful qualities. Mindfulness is not just paying attention in a certain way, it's building your capacity to see reality without, how to say this, the confusion with race. I'm going to talk about this in terms of cognition, of what we know, what knowledge is, and how we think. Most of us are they're descriptions of all of us before we're even born. When I work with educators, I remind them that the images they have of the children coming into their room, whether this is in a university setting or college, high school, or elementary school setting, there are already images of how these children can perform that exist before you meet them. And one of the first tasks of the teacher themselves is to deconstruct these expectations, these what's called in Buddhism, mirror images of the people, mirror images of children. And it's just astounding how many stereotypes that we commonly use for one another, for our children, for our parents, for members of our society. The second thing to work on personally, I think, is that I'm working on, and I will be, as far as I can tell, continue to work on, and that is the practice of othering. Othering. We learn to other when we're very, very young. We have an instinct toward that in our seeking of belonging. And so some of us only have the feeling that we belong when we have othered someone else and made them a non-belonger. You may remember this as you grew up. It's part of the human nature. But part of mindfulness is to recognize your tendency to other yourself first. How many of you have othered yourself? I remember doing a class for a police department once on diversity, and I showed them a clip of a film I had, and some of the policemen looked like me, and when they saw it, they realized the image they saw scared them. The image of themselves made them afraid. And when I was quite young, I realized that's one of the reasons I'm pissed off when I was young. I had so much of my energy had to go in to making other people comfortable with my mere existence. Because to them, I did not exist. To them, I represented something already influenced by the self-esteem complex, already influenced by greed, hatred, and ignorance. I'm a simple representation. You don't know me. And we have structured our society that way. That's part of what the election should have just made really clear. Part of this outcome is not just political, it's consciousness itself. And I was thinking about this, and we don't know each other well enough to make a shared decision about anything. We have a social psychology based on separation. And a social psychology instantly, at the same time, becomes a social design. The very minute a supremacy psychology is in place, and if inferiority psychology is in place, and society mimics that psychology in its institutions, in its leadership, and how it's judged, how people are judged, how people are evaluated, how people are rewarded. I remember once I was working as a consultant with the fire department who was under a consent decree, as it was called in those days, to have more minorities and females in the fire department if they qualified for and wanted that job. And what I discovered is it wasn't just the paperwork people were up against, it was these images that had been established of what was required for you to be this. You got to lift so many pounds, you got to run so far, all of that. When it was discovered many minorities and women could do just that, Then we hit the iceberg. And what I discovered was underneath these rules and guidelines was the story. This is a space for a hero, and you cannot have this space. We own this space. You understand what I'm saying? Now go back sometime and look at movies and read books, and you will see the conditioning of our minds around race, around gender, around every kind of category, which in the Buddhist tradition is a construct. It is a leaf in the wind. There is knowing who you are beyond how you've been described. You can reach that land without giving up your description, without being confused by how you're described, and claim your profound humanity. And for me, this is where the practice of mindfulness is so important, of spending the time and energy to learn to train yourself so that your nervous system is nourished with enough joy, enough peace, and enough wisdom so you can walk through this world undisturbed. When you're undisturbed, you can do anything. And we're all capable of this. We all have the capacity for this. We all have seeds in the garden of our heart and mind for this. It's only we've been educated otherwise. We have been conditioned otherwise. I reached the conclusion in the book that we have a state of racialized consciousness. Our very perception of reality has been racialized. And you could say also sexualized, etc. But I'm talking about race in particular right now, but the process is the same. Our view of what and who we are is dim in a tiny box. And we can't do anything about having been labeled that way. That was created before we were born. What we can do is come through the label. Be a real presence in this, be a real human being in this world, not just a label. I had an opportunity many, many years ago to be invited to LA and meet some people, and someone wanted to know if I would work on a Black movie. There was a couple of movies about inner city life, which was not so good, in my opinion. And I said, no, I won't do that. I won't do that. And the guy said, well, why won't you do that? I said, well, one is, I don't know anybody like that. This is a fiction. So, and he told me the next big thing, this was 40 years ago, he said the next big thing is going to be reality TV. I think it's a joke, because reality is not television. We're back to the world of representation. And if I only see you as the label, I never get to meet you as a real human being. I have othered you. I have confused distinguishing you as a unique presence to discriminating against you for being a unique presence. That's different. And so we have to train our minds so they become super sharp at recognizing dukkha, suffering, and the making of suffering, and how we make it ourselves, and how we make it with others, and how we project it. I had another about that I wanted to say. The rise of, I was asked before a couple of times, why did Black Lives Matter rise up? Well, from my point of view as a practitioner in Buddhism, dualisms rise together. Black Lives Matter rose up because the white supremacy of law enforcement was rising up. That's all. And right now, what we have is the right side of the equation of politics rising up in this nation. But what the right side does not understand is there cannot be a right side without the left side. So be on the lookout for the rising of the left side. Dualism. We must learn. One of my greatest examples of non-dualism, when I lived and worked in India for a couple of years and caught the trains and rode on bullock carts, etc., to get around in service and working in villages. Every now and then you see a restaurant and it would have two doors. And above one door would say vegetarian, and above the other door would say non-vegetarian. And whichever door you went through, you ended up in the same restaurant. I think that's so great. That's non-dualism, which we must train ourselves to be able to recognize. And how do we do that? We apply our mindful attention to training ourselves to look deep at things. Look deep into the causes and the conditions. Look deep till you can see their roots. Because if you don't change the bottom of that iceberg, the top will never change. That's what I've learned. Whether I was working in a corporation, a big corporation, or whether I was working in a village. Same human dynamics. We're trapped in a dim view of ourselves. A friend of mine years and years ago wrote a book called Self-Talk. And in it he discovered in his research that the person we talk to the most every day is ourselves. And so his book was about paying attention to how you talk to yourself. And try that out for a week. See what happens if you listen to yourself first. In my practice of listening to myself first, it often changes my mind or changes my heart. Just slow down a little bit. Remember, every moment is every moment, and it is precious, like you are precious. In thinking about how we have knowledge of each other, in order to have a beloved community, well, let me make it more personal. In a relationship with another person, a family member, partner, etc. What I learned, one of the things I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh is in order to have compassion, you must understand. Compassion, the birth of compassion is grounded in understanding. If we do not understand each other's suffering, if we do not understand each other's joys, hopes, and dreams, then beloved community just remains a language invention, not the heart-centered, profound movement that Martin Luther King and Thich Nhat Hanh were talking about. Because in beloved community, there's no othering. So if you want to train yourself, a friend of mine has just written a great book. It's on the New York Times list. It's called Breaking Bias. Anu Gupta, friend of mine, great book. And it's very scientific in its approach in understanding how you break the images that have been planted in your unconscious and your conscious mind, and the emotions that have been planted in your heart are in relationship to people who are not like you. And boy, does the world have an issue here. We keep trying to solve problems at the top of the iceberg when that's not the source of the problem. You got to get to the root. And the root is in, I'm going to use an image from a friend, an author I'm very familiar with, Nikos Kazantzakis, a Greek dude who wrote some great books. And he said the first spiritual duty is to learn to transcend the ego. That's our first spiritual duty as an individual. And the same thing now must be said about nations, because nations are an extension of a larger ego, a collective ego. We must learn to transcend that too. But we cannot, if we cannot transcend our own ego, it doesn't mean we don't have an ego. It means we are in charge of it. It is not in charge of us. We set ourselves an intentional life, an aspirational life, a life invested with the goodness of time and space, which we are. And we share that. So much of our time is spent in gathering things we don't even share with ourselves. How there's so many, I keep pointing this out when my wife and I are driving around, all these places that say self-storage. I think that's so incredible from many points of view, but from a Buddhist point of view, it is hilarious because there is no self. So what is stored? and why? I think Ralph Nader pointed this out like 20 years ago. He said, you know, in 1980s, there were no self-storage places, or only a few. Now it's a major industry. And I've always asked myself, what could be done with all the stuff we have in storage to alleviate suffering in the world? Suffering in our own homes, suffering in our neighborhoods, in our churches, in our synagogues, in our temples. How can we use what we have stored to heal ourselves? It is not healing us sitting there. We cannot heal the wounds of time, the trauma we have in this country just from the genocide of Native Americans and the cruelty of slavery. We all have been traumatized. No one has escaped it. Whether they are a victim of this process anywhere along the way, whether they are a witness. You know, witnesses get traumatized just by looking and doing nothing but looking. And or whether you are a perpetrator, you have also been traumatized. You must really, really understand this. All of us. In order for us to heal our trauma, And by trauma, I don't mean weakness. I mean dysregulation of our nervous system. So it either stuck on fight or flight or freeze or befriend. But I want to talk about the freeze for a moment. I think America is in a state of what's called a functional freeze. We can function, but we can function without empathy. We can function without a sense of belonging. We can function like we're a machine with no heart. We can do our jobs and dislike them. We have learned this. And we still can do a good job and dislike them. I know this myself, but that comes from the inside. That does not come from the outside of us. Our social constructs are ideas. The first place I found that had a law that discriminated against people was in Spain in the 15th century. They put a law on the books that allowed legal discrimination against Jews. We must understand this, people, if we're going to deal with this iceberg or drown. And it's so connected to the earth because the way our consciousness treats each other is the same way we treat the earth. Usable, disposable, functional. And so meditation is not just sitting still. It is that. But I practice meditation so I can sit still in myself wherever I am. Whether I'm at a Fortune 500 company in the boardroom with a CEO, or if I'm in a rural village in India or Africa, Latin America, Asia, or some other place. We have to train ourselves to be present wherever we are so that our goodness, inherent goodness, can flow into the stream of history. And so many of us have talked ourselves out of our own value, our own worthiness, our own power. Change that self-talk. And then we have to have a talk among ourselves so that we don't other ourselves with each other, to categorize ourselves as various forms of plague or sin or deprivation. No, the ancients, our ancestors knew a lot about how we should categorize ourselves. And most of the ways they did, to be honest, make me spiritually jealous. I want to give you an example of what I mean. I've had several experiences in different cultures and countries with people's practices, spiritual practices. And I was at an event, a Native American event in Colorado one year, and at the end of a sweat lodge, and et cetera, the shamans wrapped every person one by one inside of the eagle claw, eagle feathers, eagle wings. You have no idea how big an eagle wing is. You just disappear in it. And boy, oh boy, do I have respect for eagles now in a whole different way because it entered my energy. And I became aware I was part of something that was primitive and vital and could fly. And so many of us talk ourselves out of takeoff. So if you're a writer, write. If you're an artist, art. If you're a singer, sing. If you must, we have to use our gifts and talents to bring in the new world. It is not going to come to us through political means. It's going to come to us through consciousness itself, which is already present in us. We just have to water the garden, give it the herbs and the nourishment it needs, and then celebrate it, not critique it. It is never going to be perfect. Don't hope for it to be. Hope for it to be present. Hope for it to be present. It does not have to be perfect, because presence rules the day. And so to be able to carry into our kitchen tables and to our families and to our meetings a presence of compassion and wisdom that comes from the practice of mindfulness in continuing in a deep way is a wonderful gift if you never say anything in a meeting. In fact, we must learn how to use our energy to change things without ever saying a word. And that has been my experience on meeting certain people, quite a few people around this world, whose energy changed me and they never said a thing. Thich Nhat Hanh was one of those people. Andy Young was one of those people. Martin Luther King was one of those people. Rosa Parks was one of those people, for example. And Rosa could change your life from quite a distance. I was at a National Council of Churches meeting in Detroit in 1969, 1970, and there's rumble in the crowds, and everybody has their own little spot with brochures from their church, their congregation, etc., their temple, etc. And the word went around, Rosa Parks is coming, Rosa Parks is coming. So I was looking up to see this, huge person, and she's quite tiny. And she became my example of the Buddhist Bodhisattva Samantabhadra, which is an elephant. And there's a statue to this elephant in China, which I have been to. And you do a ritual with the elephant, and that was, you lay your hands on it and you meditate, etc. And Rosa came into my mind. Big energy, big heart. When I lived in Calcutta, India for 2 years, I got more acquainted with the work of Sister Teresa. And I can say to you, she was no joke. No joke at all. And so we must understand, I think, that we are up against principalities and powers, to use language from the Old Testament. It is not just people, it's ideologies and ways of thinking and the energy they provide, the nourishment they provide people. And so we must realize we must also nourish people with what we have to offer. And lift them up, as Booker T. Washington said, the best way to raise yourself up is to raise someone else up. Pick somebody to raise up. That can be young or old or in between. Or maybe it's a group you want to raise up. Raise them up so they can come into voice. They can come into song. They can come into harmony, speech, thinking, and behavior that in fact that can create the new world. Last thing I would say, there's a new, in the 1950s, somebody wrote a book called The Social Imagination. And I thought to myself before I found this out that I was creating a new word. And then I discovered somebody had already done that. So I've been studying the social imagination. And my conclusion is our biggest obstacle is our ego. We have got to learn over and over daily. Every day I'm I'm practicing letting my ego take a back seat and letting my heart move up front. I don't throw my ego out of the car because it might be needed in an emergency. I let my heart drive my life now. It takes a lot of trust and a lot of risk. We must trust and risk together because actually we have to create a new ethic. And we have to create it together or it won't work for us. This cannot be someone else's ethic. It has to be the ethic carved out of our hearts and minds, out of our lived experience. We have no way of judging anything. I have my way, you have your way, but we don't have a way. We must have a way, and we have an intuitive way handed down by our ancestors from every conceivable tradition. And so if you don't know what spiritual traditions exist in your lineage, take a look. There's plenty of wisdom. I have said to some of my students, if you haven't studied Celtic shamanism, what's the matter with you? That's an incredible body of wisdom and knowledge. I studied with a Celtic shaman. I know. And if you haven't done that for yourself, what are you talking about? Get connected to your ancestral roots spiritually. Learn those practices that might work for you, that might not work for you, that might be modified or might need to be totally invented. But take on the task of doing that through song, poetry, dance, music, art, and any other way you can think of. So we've got to get more of our images into the hearts and minds of people. More exposure to our gifts and talents that are not simply categorized as entertainment. And lastly, through the process of mindfulness meditation, you can go deep, get your attention, learn how to direct your attention. You can go deeper. You can look at what you see, and you can go even deeper than that and look at how what you see is empty of a separate self. For example, this book, which you've come across, is made of, thank you, it's made of Cleveland, Ohio. It's made of India. It's made of my adoption. It's made of my parents, my grandparents. It's made of dark nights during the civil rights movement in the South. It's made of the bombing of my house. It's made of all the things I've done, and it's not a separate thing. It's many causes and conditions made this possible. Learn to look at everything that way, not from one point of view. Learn to look at it from what emptiness does not mean nothing's there. Emptiness means this is full of something. What is it full of? Paper, ink. My editor that I just learned that passed away, Terry, is in this book. The publishing company is in this book. My beloved mother is in this book. Learn to look at everything so you can see its profundity. And as that happens, our dim view of ourselves and one another is transformed. And we don't disappear, we become transparent. And we become transparent to life itself. And that is what changes us. That changes the life iceberg at the bottom. And therefore, the top has to shift. So meditation, study is of real value. It's my neurosis. I like to study. I always have. But study, become learned in something. So don't let anyone take your mind away from your own gifts and talents. The purity of your own heart. You know, we learn by imitation. This has been known a lot. We still do. So when I look at the election we just experienced, I ask myself, how much of this was imitation? How much of this was theater? If you have a feeling you don't know how this happened, neither does Obama. And he has said that. It's because we've been looking at the top of the iceberg. The issue happened in the belly of the iceberg. And so I know it can be a little scary to go deep, but we have to. We have to go deep. And deep, I mean in love and joy, as well as the energies for justice. That way we don't burn out. Joy and peace keep us alive and vital. So again, I want to thank you. I had one in a note. Beloved community. Oh, I was thinking of Bell Hooks. One of her beautiful statements is that, I have it written down here somewhere, I don't want to. It's here. I'll have to trust my memory. It was basically, when you have beloved community in your life, you have the love of beloved community. And if you don't have beloved community in your life, you do not have that love. And we all want that love. But that love is beyond what we think.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our beloved community who embody love. We thank you for being here today. We thank you to Dr. Larry Ward and his family and the Lotus Institute and our partners here for making this possible. We transcended time and space.
We did.
We did. And we are on the pathway to transcending that cycle of hate, fear, and ignorance with our joy and our peace and our love. And so we want to thank you. I know some people have to leave. And I didn't know if you wanted to do a few questions. Oh,
Sure, that'll be fine.
okay, thank you. Somebody does have their hand raised.
We could unmute, because I realize we don't have the Q&A setting for some reason, so I'm gonna give the word to Eileen. Let me see how I can allow her to unmute her microphone. Actually don't know how to do it. Do you know I mean, like, I know how to do it, but I don't see her here. So where?
Oh, I can see her and I can allow her to talk. Hi, Eileen. Are you able to go off mute? Or Eileen, you might be able to share with us your question or comment in the chat. It might go directly to us and then we can say it to the group.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Let's see.
Maybe while she types her question, we can give the word to Christina.
Yeah.
So,
Can you hear me now?
oh, now we can hear you. Yes,
Mhm.
sorry.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Atia.
Mhm.
I've really appreciated this talk. And I was wondering, Dr. Ward, if you could elaborate more on watering the garden, especially in the face of those who would mean to do harm to those who prefer peace and love as our means of shifting consciousness in the world.
Okay. Beautiful question. Thich Nhat Hanh often used the language of what he called to be selective watering. So when you look at our mind is like a garden of seeds. Our heart is like a garden of seeds. And you have to choose what you're going to take care of, what you're going to let grow, what you're going to nourish, and what you're not going to nourish, and what you're not going to let grow. And I try to remind people, don't start by trying to kill all the weeds because the weeds are part of the nutriment of the flowers themselves. Don't get into an inner dualism with yourself. But understand that what you give attention to grows. We know this in purely neuroscience language. What we give attention to in our brain literally lights up, develops clusters of communication around that attention. And so what I go back to a great story in the life of the Buddha. Shortly after his awakening, he was surrounded by Mara, quote unquote, the devil, and who had an army of archers. And they all shot arrows at the Buddha. And just before the arrows landed where the Buddha was, they turned into flowers. So once I learned that story, heard that story, I thought, I'm going to practice like that. Because I have had plenty of arrows shot at me that got through, right? So it's developed, it's called self-cultivation. The practice of self-cultivation. You cultivate yourself so that you have stability enough not to be moved off the chessboard or scared by the lion's roar. Because the lion is going to roar. That's what it does. Just like the selection, that's what it did. That was a lion's roar. But do not tremble. It's just a lion. And lions are impermanent, like the rest of us. Lions are also empty of a separate self. There are many thousands of causes and conditions that made the selection turn out the way it did, not just one. And the same logic can be applied to the next election, which we need to be working on now. For example. So water the good seeds, build your strength in your nervous system. One of the practices there, you can go to our website. We have a course on nervous system resilience. But it's about watering your nervous system, resourcing yourself. And athletes do this while they're on the line, they do it in training. They try to make sure they have an image and a vision and an emotional connection to their own outcome. And we need to apply this in our daily life. Just because we're not a superstar athlete, we are a superstar nevertheless.
Yeah. And I also wanted to bring attention, and you mentioned practices. If you're reading the book Racial Karma, there are many, many practices, I would say many practices offered in the third part, Deeper Still.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Dr. Ward, if many of those practices, what I appreciate is that we can do them with ourselves, for ourselves. I was curious if there were ones you would recommend that we do collectively and in community.
Yes.
And then after that, we'll go to Christina.
I think the sequence is important. So I think we have to do these practices on ourselves, for ourselves, and develop self-regulation, to put it in neuroscience terms. Our own sense of stability and presence, not perfection. Because I've heard enough people say, I'm not perfect enough to do this. Do it anyway. And so, yeah, all of these are also related to the brain and creating different states of mind, which literally alter your brain's chemistry and its structure. And so I think the sequence is individual self-regulation, learning that art, and it does take intention to do that. And secondly, as one becomes more capable of self-regulation, co-regulation, it can emerge and be incredibly powerful.
Okay.
And then after co-regulation, after we have that experience, or we are in that experience, we can begin to experience co-imagination.
Oh. Co-imagination.
But we are stuck if we're back to my Chicago story. None of us walked in that room with our nervous system regulated. We walked into that room full of trauma that had not been processed, and not been named, and not been dealt with emotionally. And when we're in those states, we take it on whoever is closest to us.
Yeah. We have someone else who would like to ask a question. Christina, I think you have permission to talk, unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Dr.
Hello.
Ward. Thank you so much for joining us and
Sure.
being so generous. My question is, well, it's got two parts. So, in your book, you talk about healing as a practice that takes time, and I'm thinking about how to hold this practice alongside a sense that time is running out. As we witness things like genocide and climate crisis that feel so urgent. So my question has to do with how might our practices with stillness be adapted to respond to a sense of urgency? And also, I'm interested in how you used poetry in your book to bridge the sections. And I wonder if poems are a resource for being with stillness and activation in this way as kind of holders of time.
Thank you. Wonderful question. I'll start with the poet insight you have. Yes. Poetry is a wonderful vehicle, tool, instrument, resource for not only self-expression of what has not been said, but what has been unsaid. And or what has been forgotten. So I mean, I study poets. I just like studying poets, like Kabir, poet from India, great one-liner. I laugh when I hear the fish in the water is thirsty. So what would it mean to look at that phrase, that koan, if you will, as a meditation? What in your life are you thirsty for that you already have? What is it that is good in your life that you've forgotten about or you haven't paid attention to for a long time? Learning how to nourish ourselves without taking for granted the urgency of our lives. There's a phrase from the Zen tradition called practice like your hair is on fire. That's how I practice. Immediately, absolutely urgently. And then this is an ancient question in Buddhism, which I have been asked by some high monks in China, along with Thich Nhat Hanh. Is enlightenment sudden? Do you get it all at once? Or is it gradual? And the answer is yes. Lindsay Boggs said the same thing in a different way. We must focus on the immediate with great urgency around justice and peace and harmony, but we cannot forget the long term. We must think beyond the immediate to shape the next society.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just to use a samurai, last image, long sword, short sword. They had those for a reason. Always think long-term and urgent.
Imagine.
Don't get caught in the dualism. Do them both
Do them both.
all the time.
All the time. Do them both all the time. I would like to invite the beloved community to join me once more in expressing our gratitude and love and the joy and strength in being together today and in the presence with one another, and especially with our brother, Dr. Larry Ward. We want to just remind you that you can stay connected to us and in touch with us through the WashU Mindfulness group. And I put a link in the chat. And with that, we give ourselves peace and grace and go forward in our next activities, holding on to this sense of presence and the power and raising the consciousness with our peace and our joy and our love. Thank you.
Thank you.
I close the webinar now. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you.
Much. And Atia.
Take good care.